It was a Tuesday morning, one of those frantic starts where I barely had time to finish my coffee before racing out the door. I was just about to leave for work when the doorbell rang. It was Jake, my older brother. He was holding Emma and Noah by their tiny hands, and they looked a little out of sorts with their backpacks dangling at awkward angles. Jake barely met my eyes as he shuffled them inside. "Just for an hour," he said, his voice breezy, as if dropping the kids unexpectedly was the most natural thing in the world. He explained that he had an emergency. Maybe it was the rushed nature of it all, or the fact that Jake never voluntarily asked for help, but I didn't press him for details. I had no reason to doubt him then, so I nodded and assured him it was fine. I shooed them all in without asking further questions, secretly hoping my meeting could be rescheduled. Emma and Noah settled into the living room, oblivious to the chaos their father left behind. I quickly texted my boss, something about a family situation, and tried to focus on keeping the kids entertained for the short time Jake promised. An hour passed, then two. I tried calling Jake, but each call went straight to voicemail. I told myself he was probably caught up, maybe stuck in traffic or tied up in whatever emergency had pulled him away. But as the hours continued to slip by, so did my confidence in that comforting little lie. By the afternoon, I began to worry. I left messages, sent texts, all unanswered. My anxiety slowly turned to anger. What kind of emergency could this be that Jake wouldn't even check in? The kids, blissfully unaware, were busy drawing pictures and chattering away, their innocence in stark contrast to the knot forming in my stomach. As evening approached, I realized I needed to make plans for them. I didn't want them to feel abandoned, although that's exactly what was happening. I prepared dinner, trying to keep things as normal as possible. We played a board game afterward, Emma's favorite, while Noah huddled close, sleepy-eyed. That night, as I tucked them into bed, my thoughts raced. Jake was still missing, and the weight of responsibility began to settle heavily on my shoulders. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, wondering how on earth things had spiraled so quickly. I reached for my phone again and left another message, my voice but edged with concern. "Jake, it's late. Call me back. The kids are worried." I waited and waited, but the call never came. The house was silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the kitchen clock, each sound a reminder that my brother, their father, was nowhere to be found. I slept fitfully, if you could even call it sleep, with a persistent sense of unease. Morning dawned, and Jake was still gone. Days followed, each one blending into the next, each call going unanswered, each knock at the door filled with anticipation and eventual disappointment. I kept hoping he would show up with an apology, a reasonable explanation, something that would make sense of the mess he'd left behind, but he didn't. As time wore on, the realization settled in me: Jake had abandoned us. He had left Emma and Noah without a word or a plan. Any anger I felt was dwarfed by something else, a fierce, protective determination. These kids needed stability, and I was going to provide it, come what may. The days blurred into one another, each morning beginning with the soft sound of Emma and Noah's footsteps padding down the hallway. I took them to school, packed lunches with their favorite snacks, and read bedtime stories under the gentle glow of the nightlight. Time marched on, and without any word from Jake, I constructed a routine. It was a routine born of necessity, but it quickly became our new normal. At first, I held on to hope, a hope that dwindled with each unanswered call and each disregarded text. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on my shoulders, but I never let Emma or Noah see it. Each smile I gave them was genuine. I wanted them to feel secure, to know they were loved, even if their father's absence was a shadow that occasionally darkened their days. Months went by, and still, Jake was nowhere to be found. His silence was deafening, but eventually it lost the bite of surprise and settled into the hum of background noise. Legal guardianship became a pressing issue, and I knew I had to make it official, for the kids' sake. My first visit was to a lawyer, a sturdy woman with a no-nonsense attitude. I laid out the situation, and she calmly advised the steps I needed to take. The first time I received a school form addressed to parent/guardian, I felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. The lines between aunt and mother blurred, not by choice, but by circumstance. It was as if my role had shifted in some unfathomable legal weight. Emma and Noah needed stability, and I was determined to give them just that. There were moments of doubt, of course. Staring at the pile of bills I now managed alone, I sometimes wondered if I was in over my head. Friends and family, well-meaning, but asked if I had heard from Jake, their questions dripping with implicit judgment. I didn't let it shake me. Over time, the curious glances and whispers turned to understanding nods when they realized he truly wasn't coming back. The change in the kids was subtle at first. Noah stopped asking when his dad would pick him up from soccer practice. Emma no longer held back tears when I folded another shirt that was getting too small. They adapted faster than I ever thought possible. Emma's grades improved, and Noah's smile returned, even if it was just a fraction of its former brightness. I still watched the door sometimes, half expecting to see Jake walk through with a casual apology and some flimsy excuse. But days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, and he remained a ghost in our lives. My once small apartment transformed into a lively home, complete with artwork on the fridge and toy cars in every corner. I became familiar with the rhythm of their lives, the drop-offs, pickups, birthday parties, and endless questions that only children could conjure up. Though it was challenging, I found a new fulfillment in this unexpected chapter. The neighborhood got used to seeing me with Emma and Noah, and their teachers began calling me whenever there was an issue at school. I was more than just the emergency contact now. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Emma looked up and asked, "Do you think Dad will ever come back?" Her question hung heavy in the air. I set down my fork, choosing my words with care. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise you I'm here for both of you." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to her pasta, the moment passing but the impact lingering in my heart. I tried to keep my life steady for them, ensuring they never felt the turmoil I occasionally battled with inside. Despite the chaos Jake's absence created, it gave me a clearer understanding of what family truly means. Emma and Noah became my priority, my reason for getting up each morning with renewed energy and resolve. As months turned into nearly a year, my initial anger had faded, replaced by an acceptance that sometimes people leave, and it's nothing to do with those they leave behind. Emma and Noah flourished, and seeing them happy, thriving, made all the sacrifices worthwhile. My resolve to protect them only strengthened as time went on, even as Jake continued to be a ghost in our lives. Each day, I wondered if I'd hear the familiar ring of the doorbell signaling Jake's return. But as the seasons changed, so did our expectations. We learned to move forward without looking back, building our lives on the foundation of our newfound bond. And as unexpected as it was, I cherished this role: guardian, caretaker, and, most importantly, a steadfast presence in their lives. 3 years had passed since Jake disappeared, leaving Emma and Noah in my care. Life had settled into a routine, and I cherished the unexpected role I'd embraced. But one afternoon, as I was picking the kids up from school, my world tilted on its axis. He stood there, leaning casually against my car, the same cocky smile I remembered plastered across his face. Only this time he had someone with him, a lawyer. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jake's expression told me he felt in control, and he wasted no time making his move. "Well, this is a surprise," he said, voice grating on my nerves. "Looks like you've been playing house with my kids." I felt my jaw tighten, though I forced myself to breathe evenly. "Jake," I said, keeping my voice, "where have you been?" He shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that only deepened my frustration. "Here and there. Business, you know," he replied, as if those words could erase the years of silence. His eyes drifted towards the lawyer beside him, and I knew this was more than just a casual drop-by. The lawyer, a tall man with a stern demeanor, stepped forward. "We are here to discuss the unlawful keeping of Jake's children," he announced, voice and precise. "We have reason to believe that you have, without consent, kept Emma and Noah from their father." My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I listened to his claims. The audacity of it all left me momentarily speechless. I opened my mouth to counter his accusation, but the words caught in my throat, choked by a mix of anger and hurt. I met Jake's gaze, searching for any hint of remorse or understanding, but there was none. Just a detached indifference that made my blood boil. "I've been the one raising them," I said, voice and measured. "You left them on my doorstep and vanished. Do you remember that?" He waved a hand, as if brushing aside an old, insignificant memory. "Come on, you know I didn't mean forever," he said, a slight chuckle in his voice that twisted something deep inside me. I took a breath, refusing to let him see how much his words stung. "You haven't been around," I replied. "Not once. And now you come back with a lawyer, claiming your rights?" Jake's lawyer cleared his throat, drawing the attention back to him. "We need to resolve this matter legally," he stated, "unless you are willing to return the children immediately." I felt a protective surge as I glanced over to where Emma and Noah watched from a distance, their young faces marred by confusion. I turned back to Jake and his lawyer. "This isn't a game," I said softly. "These are their lives we're dealing with." But Jake only smirked, the glint in his eyes never wavering. "Then we'll see about that in court," he said, turning on his heel and striding away, the lawyer following suit. As they walked towards their car, I stood there feeling a mix of disbelief and determination settle over me. It wasn't just anger that fueled me. It was something deeper. a fierce need to protect Emma and Noah from being hurt again. I knew this was just the beginning of yet another battle, but for their sake, I was ready to face whatever storm Jake intended to unleash. I watched until they disappeared from view, a resolve firming my heart. Turning back to the kids, I forced a smile, shoving aside the turmoil that simmered under my skin. Reaching out, I placed a reassuring hand on their shoulders. "Let's go home," I said, my voice as I led them away from the unsettling encounter. Inside, I knew I'd do whatever it took to ensure they felt safe and loved, no matter what lay ahead. In the courtroom, I sat with a sense of calm determination, ready to face whatever Jake had concocted. My heart clenched as I glanced over to see him saunter in, that smirk still plastered across his face. He carried himself with a confidence that felt misplaced, given everything he'd abandoned. His lawyer was a tall figure who moved with a precision that suggested this wasn't his first time bending the truth. As the proceedings began, Jake's lawyer stood, presenting a file with a self-assured flair. He approached the judge and handed over the documents, then turned to face me, a glint in his eyes. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and convincing, "we have evidence that suggests my client was coerced into relinquishing his responsibilities." My heart skipped a beat. Coerced? The word hung heavily in the air, a bitter accusation wrapped in lies. I watched as the judge perused the documents, my mind racing over every possibility. What had Jake done? What fabrication lay within those papers? Jake sat across from me, his expression one of boredom, as if this entire charade was beneath him. The sense of betrayal was profound, but I shoved it down, knowing I needed to stay focused. I couldn't let his lies unsettle me in front of the judge, or Emma and Noah, who anxiously awaited news outside. The lawyer continued, "These documents," he gestured to the papers now in the judge's hands, "clearly show my client was misled into believing he had no other option but to leave his children in the care of their aunt." His tone was, each word dripping with false sincerity. I forced myself to listen without reacting, my eyes fixed on the judge as he reviewed Jake's so-called evidence. I knew it was all fabricated. There had never been a moment when Jake wasn't free to return, to make amends. But now, here he was, trying to rewrite history with a few strokes of a pen. As the judge looked up, I met his gaze, hoping my calm resolve would speak louder than Jake's deceit. "These documents suggest a concerning narrative," he said, his voice neutral. "The claim is significant. Do you have anything to say in response?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was my moment to refute Jake's concoction, to stand firm in the truth I had lived every day for the past 3 years. "Your Honor," I began, my voice, "I never coerced Jake into anything. He left on his own, promising to return within an hour. That hour stretched into years, without a word, a call, or a shred of responsibility from him." The lawyer interrupted, an edge to his voice. "And yet, here we are with official documents speaking otherwise." I met his gaze, unwavering. "Documents can be forged," I said, my tone aiming to convey the truth without letting the anger embroiled within me take over. But the reality Jake left behind, the silence, the absence that cannot be fabricated or ignored. Jake shifted in his seat, his posture, as though this was all a minor inconvenience. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps fear of being found out. His facade was beginning to crack, and I held on to that thought, knowing I had my own evidence yet to be revealed. The judge nodded, setting the papers down with a measured deliberateness. "We'll reconvene shortly," he announced, signaling a brief recess. As he rose, the room stirred with a low murmur of anticipation, the tension palpable. I remained seated, my hands clasped together tightly, as Jake and his lawyer exited the courtroom, their footsteps echoing through the hushed hall. I stayed back, needing a moment to gather my thoughts, to brace myself for what was to come. The weight of the truth was on my shoulders, and although the road ahead seemed daunting, I knew in my heart that it was one I was determined to walk. For Emma, for Noah, and for the life we had built together. A life that wouldn't be dismantled by the lies Jake wielded so carelessly. Outside the courtroom, a familiar sense of certainty settled over me. I was ready to refute, ready to reveal, and ready to protect the little family that fate had entrusted to me. As I sat in the quiet corner of the court, my mind replayed the last few years like a broken record. After all Jake's bravado, his arrogance, I felt now, this wasn't just about winning. It was about setting things right for Emma and Noah. I reached into my bag and withdrew the thick envelope. It felt almost too light, considering the weight of the truth it carried. Each item within spoke louder than words ever could, evidence meticulously gathered over the months, each piece a reminder of Jake's absence. When the courtroom reconvened, I took a deep breath, feeling a certainty settle over me. The judge looked at me expectantly, and I nodded, placing the envelope on the table in front of me. The sound of it landing seemed to echo, a prelude to the revelations it held. I spoke, each word measured and clear. Inside this envelope, I explained, were countless records of unreturned messages, texts, voicemails that spanned weeks, months, each one a silent testimony to Jake's abandonment. As the judge picked up the first printout, eyes scanning the dates, the unanswered pleas for information, for reassurance, and each with no reply. Next, I revealed receipts, a ledger of sorts, chronicling every expense since the day I found myself as Emma and Noah's guardian. Food, clothing, school supplies, each line item a testament to the life I had built for them in his absence. The judge flipped through them, nodding occasionally, but it was the notarized statements that held the most weight. Friends and neighbors had signed affidavits, recounting their bewilderment at Jake's disappearance, their support as I took on the challenge of parenthood. These were people who had watched my life transform overnight, their signatures underscored by the sincerity of their words. Jake's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently to him, his demeanor faltering as he glanced sideways at Jake. Jake's face, once a mask of confidence, now seemed to crumble slightly beneath the scrutiny of the judge. Throughout it all, I kept my expression, my gaze unwavering. This was the moment I'd prepared for, the culmination of years spent wondering if Jake would ever walk back into their lives, and if so, who he would be when he did. The judge's eyes lingered on one particular statement, then moved to me. I could feel the room's collective gaze, the anticipation thick in the air. His voice was calm, and I could tell he weighed each word for its impact. Addressing Jake, he asked for an explanation, a reason beyond the paperwork presented by his lawyer. Jake shifted, his previous arrogance replaced with a hint of unease. His words were suddenly lacking the force they'd carried before. He claimed the pressures of life had led him astray, attempting to paint a picture of a man overwhelmed, not abandoning. But the evidence in front of us told another story, a truth that didn't align with his narrative. Each piece, each unreturned message, each receipt, each statement shattered the illusion he tried to project. I stayed silent, allowing the documents to speak for themselves. They carried the weight of honesty, something Jake's claims sorely lacked. The truth bare and undeniable, and no amount of bluster could change that. The judge looked between us, his eyes settling on Jake, then turning briefly to address his lawyer. I could sense the shift in the room, a collective realization that perhaps Jake's story wasn't quite as seamless as he had hoped it would be. My heart thudded with both anxiety and a quiet hope. There was a soft but telling sign from Jake's lawyer, as if conceding what we all now understood. Jake avoided my gaze, his bravado slipping away like a fading memory, and though there was a whisper of victory within me, I remained composed, focused on the task at hand. The lives of Emma and Noah were at stake, and more than anything, they deserved the security and love they had found with me. With a measured nod, the judge acknowledged the evidence presented. It was clear he recognized the truth, and the room began to settle with a palpable anticipation for his forthcoming decision. I awaited his words, knowing whatever came next was a testament to the relentless pursuit of what was right, for the children who had captured my heart and became my family. The judge sat back, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom with a calm deliberation, before returning to the table where Jake and his lawyer sat. The silence stretched, a stark contrast to the heated accusations that had flown mere moments earlier. Jake fidgeted, his confidence unraveling as the weight of his own deceit settled heavily on his shoulders. This was not the triumphant return he had envisioned. Breaking the silence, the judge addressed Jake directly, his voice cutting through the tension that hung in the air. Mr. Thompson, the evidence presented today paints a very different picture from the one you initially described. His words were measured, each carrying the weight of an impending judgment. I watched as Jake's bravado continued to disintegrate, his tale of woeful misunderstanding exposed for the fabrication it truly was. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing toward his lawyer as if seeking a lifeline. But there was no rescue coming. The truth was laid bare before us all. The whispers of those surrounding us in the gallery only deepened his shame. I remained still, my own emotions, knowing that every moment the judge took was a step closer to safeguarding Emma and Noah's future. As the judge flipped through the stack of documents I had provided, there was a palpable shift in the room. Each fact, each statement, rendered his lies impotent. Jake's lawyer leaned in, murmuring, conceding to the judge the unreliability of Jake's narrative. Jake's face paled, the reality of his situation crashing down in a humiliating wave. The judge then turned his attention to me, acknowledging with a nod the depth of the evidence. It's clear you've provided a stable environment for the children in Mr. Thompson's absence. His voice was yet there was a warmth in his acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition of the journey I'd undertaken for Emma and Noah. It was a flickering beacon of hope in this sea of formalities. Jake attempted to interject, his voice desperate, but it was too late. His words were swept aside by the mounting truths that fortified my position. The judge raised a hand to silence him, a gesture that left no room for further deceit. In that moment, the courtroom felt impossibly small, the anticipation hanging thickly over us. The judge resumed formal proceedings, his voice the weight of the decision yet to come. But I could sense where it was headed, the balance of justice tipping toward what was just and right. I felt a sense of satisfaction, though tempered by the knowledge that this wasn't about victory over my brother. It was about Emma and Noah having the life they deserved, one not overshadowed by deceit or abandonment. The judge then addressed Jake again, his tone, "The evidence speaks volumes, Mr. Thompson. It aligns with the care and responsibility showcased by your sister. The court sees no reason to disrupt the stability provided." His words were of any remaining defense Jake might muster. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The truth was prevailing here, finally giving voice to the silent fears and sleepless nights that had haunted me through those early years of uncertainty. My resolve remained, knowing this was far from over, but the direction was clear. As the courtroom settled once more, Jake's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, the gesture, a silent admission of defeat. I felt empathy for my brother, but only briefly. His choices had led us here, not mine. The judge concluded by stating that a formal decision would follow soon, leaving a finality in his words that echoed throughout the room. The lives of Emma and Noah were no longer in limbo. They were anchored in the certainty of the love and home I had fought to give them. I experienced a moment of reflection, knowing that despite the turmoil, what was right and just had triumphed. With a nod, he adjourned the session, and the chatter of the courtroom began to fade into the background. As I gathered my things, I glanced at Jake one last time. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them a fleeting sense of acknowledgement. Perhaps he understood, in some small way, the depth of what he had given up. But that was a conversation for another time, if at all. With Emma and Noah's future secured, I left the courtroom with a heart, knowing that we were finally moving forward, together. The courtroom was silent as the judge began to speak, his voice filling the room with a sense of finality. After reviewing the evidence and considering the welfare of the children involved, he said, "It is the decision of this court to grant permanent guardianship to the petitioner." He glanced in my direction, acknowledging the sacrifice and dedication I had shown Emma and Noah. Relief washed over me like a wave, steadying the tumult inside. Jake sat across the room, his face a mask of disappointment and anger. The corners of his mouth twitched, struggling to maintain semblance as the judge continued. "Furthermore," the judge added, "Mr. Jacob Thompson will be required to commence monthly child support payments, effective immediately." And in that moment, I felt the weight of the past years lift from my shoulders. Jake's lawyer turned to him, a pat on the back that seemed to say, "We did what we could." Jake's expression hardened. His bravado had finally crumbled under the scrutiny of truth. I saw him clench and unclench his fists, refusing to meet my eyes. There was a brief flicker of something almost like regret, but it disappeared as quickly as it had come. The judge's gavel struck, sealing the judgment with a sound that seemed to echo endlessly. I nodded, absorbing the gravity of his words. My love and care had been recognized in a way that was unshakable, grounding us in a future free of uncertainty. As we all stood up to leave, I caught the eye of the court clerk. She offered a nod, a silent congratulations that made me feel less alone in this stark room. I managed a full gesture of gratitude and relief. This decision, this moment, it affirmed everything I'd fought for. Jake finally stood, his silhouette against the backdrop of the courtroom. In that tense quiet, I left without a word, refusing to give his bitterness any further oxygen. Emma and Noah deserved a fresh start, one not clouded by past decisions. As I exited the room, the corridor seemed brighter, the weight on my chest considerably lighter. The fight had been long and relentless, but as I made my way down the steps of the courthouse, I knew this was the start of a new chapter for us, one that I would write with all the hope and love I'd saved up for these precious moments. For Emma and Noah, the path was now clear, and for me, their guardian, there was no greater triumph. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp and invigorating, almost as if the world had been holding its breath with me. I felt the warmth of the sun on my face, a reminder that life was moving forward, and so were we. Emma and Noah waited at home, blissfully unaware of the day's proceedings, their laughter and innocence untouched by the shadow of this battle. My focus was clear now, to provide them with the stability and love they had known only with me. As I reached my car, a sudden wave of emotion washed over me, an unexpected mix of relief and quiet triumph. This was the moment I had fought for, not just in court, but over every long day and night for the past 3 years. Every tear wiped, every bedtime story read, each small moment had built to this. The court's decision wasn't merely a ruling, it was an affirmation that I had been right to fight this battle for them. The decisive win, though, was when I opened the letter that had been waiting for me at home. Inside was the official order, a document declaring me as Emma and Noah's permanent guardian. The weight of those words on paper was like solid ground beneath my feet, an agreement that could not be swayed or undone by Jake's whims or fabrications. It was binding, a truth etched into the landscape of our lives. I called a family friend, someone who'd supported me through this trying time. Her voice on the other end was a comforting presence, someone who understood the magnitude of this victory. As we spoke, I could feel the tension unwind from around my heart, replaced by a calm, quiet resolve. We celebrated not with fanfare, but with the shared understanding of what had been gained. Later, as I entered the house, Emma ran towards me, her eyes bright with joy. Noah followed, clutching his favorite toy dinosaur. Their hugs were the only accolades I truly needed. In that moment, I knew that the sense of home was about so much more than mere walls and a roof. It was about feeling safe, cherished, and whole. Together, we were all of these things. In the kitchen, I found a note from Jake's lawyer, delivered with the letter. It was a formal apology, acknowledging the baselessness of their claims. Though it came late, it was a small shred of justice, an admission of his attempts now futile and dismissed. But I let it fall from my fingers into the recycling bin. It was irrelevant now. I spent that evening with Emma and Noah, promising them a future filled with love, understanding, and the security they deserved. We sat together at the dinner table, the clinking of forks and spoons mingling with laughter, creating a melody of life moving forward. I could see a glimmer of curiosity in their eyes about where we were heading next, but I wanted them to savor the now, this calm after the storm. The glow of the night settled in softly, and I tucked them into bed with stories of adventure and bravery, tales reflecting the journey we had walked together. As they drifted to sleep, I lingered at the door, absorbing the peace in their slumber. The promise of tomorrow, of every tomorrow after this one, felt secure and bright. I closed my own bedroom door with a sense of closure. The fight had ended here, with the silence of a room no longer filled with strife but with purpose. The path ahead was ours to forge, and the bonds between us were unbreakable. For Emma, for Noah, and for myself, this was the beginning of a new story, rooted in love and bound by the triumph of truth.